Hey guys, tonight we journey into the dirt-caked, lice-ridden, nose-wrinkling world of medieval hygiene. You're about to step barefoot into a cobbled street that hasn't seen a scrub since... ever. The air is thick with a stew of smells, some vaguely floral, most not. Chickens squawk freely, pigs do as they please, and humans... well, they live in delightful oblivion. You probably won't survive this, but hey, at least you'll smell historically accurate. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments where you're listening from, and what time it is for you right now. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're walking. Slowly. The path beneath your feet squelches in a way that tells you this is no ordinary mud. It's 1347. Maybe 1348. You've lost track because time is a blur when the sun rises and sets behind soot-covered rooftops, and the bell tolls not for time, but for sickness or sermons. Your shoes, thick leather, barely stitched, are already soaked. Not with water. No, this is a mix. Discarded food, chamber pot contents tossed from an upstairs window, and the slow oozing runoff from the butcher stall up the street. You've heard of people losing a boot to the sludge. You start lifting your feet higher, the air, it assaults you. A warm blast of livestock, wood smoke, body odor, rotting vegetables, and something disturbingly sweet. You try to breathe through your mouth, but that makes it worse. Now you taste it. To your left, a child darts barefoot across the street, chasing a wooden hoop. His feet slap the muck like he's never known fear. He hasn't. He also hasn't had a bath in 3 years. But you'll learn more about that soon. That house you're walking past, it's timber-framed, leaning precariously as if it's trying to whisper something secret. Maybe it's saying, "Don't step there," but it's too late. Your foot sinks slightly into what you pray is cabbage. There's movement above. A second-floor window creaks open, and instinctively you leap to the side. A brownish splash hits where you just stood. Someone just emptied their chamber pot. Again. That's the fourth one this hour. Some households shout, "Gardez-lou," a warped warning from the French, "Regardez l'eau," meaning, watch out for the water. Most don't bother. You duck into an alley to escape the smell, but the alley greets you with worse. Rats, plump from an easy life, scatter as you disturb their feast. A crust of bread, half covered in fly eggs, and a disturbingly gnawed finger. Is it a prop from a butcher's prank? Or... no, best not to dwell. A medieval street is a living thing. It heaves and breathes. Its arteries are clogged with people, wagons, stray animals, and merchants who shout their wares despite the stink. Fishwives call out from wooden stalls, their wares glistening more from fly saliva than freshness. An eel escapes one basin and flops toward a drain. No one notices. The baker's shop is next, and at last, a welcome smell. Warm bread. But even that's tinged with smoke and the unmistakable scent of wet wool. People bake. People eat. But rarely do they wash. A man in a long, matted tunic brushes past you. He's got a friendly smile that smells like a goat that's lost the will to live. You notice something in his hair. Lice. Definitely lice. You try not to make eye contact. He offers you a toothless grin. "Fine weather," he says cheerfully. You nod, because there's no medieval small talk more classic than pretending everything's fine while wading through filth. He points up the street. "Barbers giving free leechings today. Feel light as a feather after." You smile politely and edge away. Note to self: avoid free anything involving leeches. A chicken pecks at your shoe. You stare into its beady eye, and it stares back, unblinking. It probably owns this block. You walk on, A priest passes holding his robes up to avoid the worst of the slop. Clutches a sachet of herbs to his nose. Not because he's delicate, but because that's literally what they believe filters disease. The theory is simple. If it smells bad, it is bad. Miasma. Evil vapors. That's what causes plague and sickness. Not germs, those won't be a thing for 500 more years. So everyone's fighting bad smells like it's the final boss of hygiene. Herbs, lavender pouches, oranges stuffed with cloves. People hang dried flowers around their necks. It makes them smell like a doomed wedding. A cart rumbles by, wheels creaking, and you see its contents. Barrels, hay, a dead pig, and a man. Not dead, just sleeping. On top of the pig. A lady peeks out from a cloth-draped stall. She sells combs, toothpicks, and what she claims are bath powders. You don't ask questions. There's a scent wafting from her stand that you swear is part lavender, part something legally concerning. You pass another house. There's a narrow drain carved into the street running from the building to the main road. Water trickles through, brownish and bubbly. That's not water. These streets aren't designed with drainage in mind. They slope toward the center, forming a kind of sludge river that flows lazily, never truly drying. In the summer, it bakes into a crust. In the winter, it freezes solid and becomes a deadly skating rink of doom. You see a bucket tumble from a window and splash near an older woman carrying bread. She doesn't flinch, just sighs. Just another Tuesday. You find a low stone bench and sit. Carefully, you look up. Above you, someone is emptying a chamber pot. You run. Again. Historians still argue whether the filth of medieval streets was more due to ignorance or just lack of alternatives. Sure, people knew cleanliness mattered. There were even rudimentary laws about throwing waste. But enforcement was like asking a goose to file paperwork. A few cities tried. London had ordinances about trash dumping, and Paris had public sanitation notices. But good intentions can't beat 1,000 years of barefoot kids, stray pigs, and 0 sewer systems. You finally step into a courtyard. It's quieter here. Less crowded. A cat slinks by, looking smug and suspicious. Probably ate something alive 10 minutes ago. You breathe. It's still foul, but maybe less foul? Or maybe you're just adjusting. Your nose is evolving. Your standards are crumbling. You're becoming one of them. And just when you think you've found peace, a man nearby starts coughing violently. He holds a cloth to his face, pulls it away, and yep, blood. But let's not worry about that right now. That's a story for later. For now, you're here, ankle deep in history's filthiest welcome mat. Sleep tight. You wander farther from the bustling street, guided more by the instinct to escape smell than any real sense of direction. At the edge of the village, you find a wooden structure with steam curling out from its cracks. Curious and mildly hopeful, you step inside. It's a bathhouse, or what passes for one. The air is thick and damp, and it clings to your clothes like a needy ghost. Inside, several wooden tubs are arranged in a loose semicircle. They're more like barrels cut in half than the claw-footed luxuries you'd expect. A couple of them steam. A couple look questionable. A woman scrubs a child with a rag that's seen better centuries. She hums while doing it, and the child squirms, more annoyed than soothed. You watch as she dips the cloth into the same water she's already used on 3 other kids. Sanitation is not part of the equation. Efficiency is. Bathing in medieval times wasn't a daily ritual. Heck, it wasn't even weekly. Most people bathed maybe once a month, if they were lucky, and by bathed, we mean sat in slightly warm water and hoped it reached the important bits. You spot a small wooden sign with pricing etched into it. 1 copper for hot water, half a copper if it's reused water. Yes, you read that correctly, used. The first person gets cleanish water. The 7th person is practically just marinating in everyone else's filth. You consider the implications and back away from the tub, like it might lunge at you. Bathhouses were once more popular, especially during the Roman Empire's heyday. But by the medieval period, especially the later Middle Ages, public bathing had begun to fall out of fashion. Why? Well, several reasons. First, firewood was expensive. Heating enough water to fill even one small tub meant burning through valuable resources. Second, the church. Religious leaders started whispering that public bathing encouraged sinful behavior. Because surprise, people often got very friendly in steamy rooms. Some bathhouses were also thinly veiled brothels, and the lines got blurry fast. Third, and perhaps most absurd, people started thinking baths were dangerous. Not just a little risky, but full-on, this might kill you territory. The logic went something like this. Bathing opens the pores, and open pores let disease in. So, ironically, cleaning yourself made you vulnerable. It was like walking into battle without armor, only your armor was dirt. Doctors wrote treatises explaining how water exposure could unbalance the humors and cause fevers, plague, or even sudden death. One writer warned that those who bathe frequently are often struck down by catarrh and weakness of the limbs. Another claimed cold baths would drive blood away from the brain, leaving a man confused. Basically, take a bath, lose your thoughts. So people stopped bathing, or rather, they adjusted. Dry washing became popular. That meant rubbing your skin with a dry cloth or brushing it with straw to remove visible dirt. You didn't necessarily smell better, but you looked a bit less like you wrestled in a pig pen. Some nobles, still obsessed with appearances, used scented oils instead of washing. They'd apply perfume, rosewater, or even vinegar to mask the smell. One French count was famous for dousing himself with orange blossom water so liberally that his dog once fainted. You spot a young man outside the bathhouse. He's shirtless, scrubbing himself with a mix of ash and cold water in a wooden basin. His teeth chatter, but he seems determined. A nearby woman shakes her head. "You'll catch the sickness doing that," she mutters, covering her mouth with her sleeve. He shrugs. "Rather die clean." Historians still argue whether people truly believed bathing was dangerous, or if it was just a convenient excuse to avoid the cost and effort. There's debate over how widespread this belief was. Some regions kept bath culture longer, especially in southern Europe and the Islamic world, where bathing remained tied to spiritual cleanliness. In fact, if you'd wandered into 13th century Cordoba or Cairo, you'd be shocked by the dazzling bathhouses. Marble floors, hot steam, and actual soap made with olive oil and lye. But you're not in Cordoba. You're in a muddy hamlet with half a boiled tub and 3 guys who look like they haven't seen water since birth. Soap, by the way, did exist, but it was a luxury. The good stuff, made with lye and animal fat, was expensive and often imported. Poorer folks used what they could: ashes, sand, even fermented urine. Yes, urine. It contains ammonia. It works as a cleaning agent. That doesn't make it less disturbing. A man wanders past carrying a small wooden bucket. You catch a glimpse inside. Yep, soap made from goose fat. It smells faintly of despair. At the edge of the square, a wooden stall is selling herbal sachets. The vendor claims her mixture will clean the spirit and the skin. You peek inside. Lavender, sage, maybe mint. She grinds them together with a stone and wraps the powder in thin linen. People buy them to scrub their armpits or to wear under their tunics as deodorizers. You ask her if she's ever taken a bath. "Once," she says. "For my wedding, I didn't like it." She chuckles and hands a sachet to a passing knight, who tucks it into his armor. Metal doesn't breathe, and the stench of armored men in summer could probably be weaponized. You continue wandering and stumble upon a large wooden tub behind a tavern. 2 men sit in it, pink-faced from the heat, drinking ale straight from the pitcher. Steam curls around them like they're simmering in broth. One burps contentedly. You hear a soft plop. You decide not to look. Still, this is a social ritual. Bathing, when it happens, is often communal. People chat, gossip, maybe even seal business deals while soaking. It's not just about getting clean, it's about bonding. A monk walks past eyeing the tub suspiciously. He clutches his robe tight, probably thinking about temptations and sin. Monasteries sometimes had rules limiting bathing to once a month. Some stricter orders allowed only 4 baths a year, that's 1 per season. If you miss spring, tough luck. And yet, despite everything, people tried. In towns with access to rivers, locals would sometimes wade in, especially in summer. The water wasn't exactly pure, but it was better than nothing. You see kids splashing in a shallow stream nearby. They laugh, toss reeds at each other, and completely ignore the dead fish floating 5 feet away. You pause on a stone ledge and look out over the village. The sun's setting, casting a golden light that somehow makes even the grime look charming. In the distance, chimney smoke curls lazily into the sky. A dog barks. A cart clatters. You realize something. It's not that medieval people didn't care about cleanliness. It's that they understood it very differently. To them, being clean meant removing visible dirt, smelling like herbs, and avoiding the kinds of water that might steal your soul or your sanity. They didn't have modern science. They had instincts, trial, and error, and a lot of wild guesses. And sometimes those guesses involved pouring vinegar on your feet and hoping the lice would respect your boundaries. So you rise, shake off your bathhouse observations, and head back into the village. The smell welcomes you home. You're walking again, but your attention keeps drifting upward. To heads. Specifically to what's crawling in them. Let's talk hair. A man passes you, his brown curls peeking from under a felt cap that looks like it's never met soap. His beard is impressive, full, wiry, and shining with what might be animal fat. You wonder, for a horrifying moment, whether it's deliberate. Spoiler, it is. Hair in the medieval mind was more than just vanity. It was identity, status, even health. But hygiene? That's complicated. For men, long hair was the norm, at least among those who could afford the time to let it grow and the energy to not care when it got tangled. Beards came and went depending on fashion, region, and religion. Knights and nobles often had sculpted facial hair to signal virility, wisdom, or that they had at least 3 squires who combed it daily. Commoners? They had whatever hair life gave them. Women's hair, meanwhile, was sacred and scandalous. Married women kept it covered almost always, wrapped in linen, braided tight, or tucked under wimples and veils. Uncovered hair was considered either flirtatious or foolish or both. Young maidens might wear their locks long and loose, especially at festivals, but once a woman married, her hair vanished like a magician's dove. But what about cleanliness? Lice were basically roommates. Everyone had them. There was no shame in scratching your head during dinner. It was as routine as reaching for salt. You pass a young boy sitting on a stoop, and his older sister is carefully combing through his scalp with what looks like a carved ivory tool. She pauses, squints, picks something off, and flicks it into a nearby gutter. The circle of life. Combs were incredibly common, carried on belts or hung from neck cords. They were usually made from wood, bone, or horn, and some were downright beautiful, carved with animals or vines. Dual-sided ones had wide teeth for tangles and narrow ones for bugs. Grooming was both vanity and pest control. There were even love poems about combing each other's hair. Romantic? Maybe. Itchy? Definitely. You spot a man selling oils from a wooden cart. He boasts that his rosemary and nettle concoction makes hair grow faster and keeps the tiny beasts away. A crowd gathers. He rubs the oil into a woman's scalp while she winces, probably from both the stinging herbs and the realization that it smells like an old soup pot. Still, people tried. Washing hair was rare, again because of water paranoia and soap scarcity, but when it did happen, it often involved herbal rinses. Sage, lavender, mint, and vinegar were favorites. Not exactly head and shoulders, but it did leave you smelling less like livestock. Monks shaved the crowns of their heads in a style called the tonsure. not for cleanliness but for religious humility. It was also extremely drafty. You see a novice rubbing his bald circle with a grimace. He looks at the sky as if to blame God for the breeze. You relate. In villages, it wasn't uncommon to burn clothes to get rid of lice infestations. If you couldn't afford that, you boiled them. If you couldn't do that, you just kept wearing them until the lice gave up from exhaustion. Historians still argue whether lice were ever truly managed, or whether medieval people just built up some form of mutual tolerance, like bad roommates who agree not to touch each other's stuff. And then there's the fringe stuff. Some cures for lice included rubbing ashes into the scalp, applying crushed garlic, or brace yourself, using goose fat mixed with mercury. That last one sounds like a chemical weapon, and to be honest, it kind of was. People died trying to be clean. Speaking of fringe, eyebrows. Fashion trends occasionally got weird. In some regions, women plucked their eyebrows completely and shaved their hairlines to make their foreheads look grander. Beauty apparently meant looking perpetually surprised. You watch one noblewoman painstakingly pluck her brow with a hot needle, murmuring prayers the whole time. Beauty hurts. Or maybe it just burns. You pass a mirror, or rather a polished metal plate propped on a windowsill. A young man uses it to trim his beard with shears the size of a crowbar. His friend watches approvingly. "Looking sharp," he says. The other nods, like a knight who pays his debts. It's a compliment. The beard trimming culture among knights and noblemen wasn't just fashion, it was a kind of psychological warfare. A well-groomed man suggested control, status, discipline. And let's face it, in a world where everyone smelled like goat breath and onion soup, a good beard was practically a superpower. You duck into a small wooden room with smoke billowing, from a brazier in the center. A woman stirs a pot of herbs, steam rising. This is a sweating room, a makeshift sauna. Popular in colder climates, it was the poor man's spa. People would strip down, sweat out the dirt, and scrape themselves clean with sticks or flat stones. If the lice died from heat shock, bonus, she invites you to sit. You decline politely. The last person who sat is still drying out in the corner. Interestingly, there were also social codes around hair. Long hair on a man might signal piety or rebellion. Short hair could mean monastic obedience or lice panic. A bald woman might be recovering from illness or punishment. Sometimes people were shaved as a form of public shame. And let's not forget wigs. While not as extravagant as their powdered Renaissance cousins, wigs did exist in the Middle Ages. Usually worn by the upper classes, often made from real hair, and sometimes infested with the same bugs the wearer was trying to avoid. You see one noblewoman adjusting her hairpiece, only to swat at something crawling under it. The irony writes itself. A lesser-known remedy for scalp itch? Wine. Yes, really. Some texts describe warm wine rinses as a way to cleanse the scalp and invigorate the spirit. Whether it worked or just made you smell like a tavern is unclear. Probably both. You exit the village proper and wander past a row of huts. Children chase each other giggling, each scratching at their heads like it's part of the game. An old man sits by a fire, combing his long beard while humming an off-key tune. A cat curls in his lap, watching the comb for dropped bugs. In some parts of medieval Europe, lice were even considered inevitable companions. Folk tales included them. Old women told stories of louse queens and magical fleas. They were part of daily life like shoes or spoons, only more wriggly. By now, you've probably scratched your own head at least twice just from hearing all this. That's okay. The medieval itch is contagious. Not biologically, but mentally. It worms its way into your imagination. You glance at your reflection in a puddle. Your hair is windblown, your face streaked with soot. Somewhere deep in your follicles, you wonder if a louse just winked at you. Sleep tight. You press forward, brushing an imaginary louse from your collar. It's mental now. You're forever itchy. But the next horror on your hygiene tour is waiting. this time inside your mouth. The tavern beckons. Warm candlelight, clinking mugs, and the vague promise of roast meat lure you in. But as you step inside, your nose twitches. Not from the usual medieval stench, but from a wave of garlicky, meaty, wine-soaked breath that hits like a slap. You recoil, accidentally bumping into a toothless man grinning like a jack-o'-lantern. Apologies, he wheezes and burps. You wonder, how did anyone survive with teeth in this world? The answer? Many didn't. Let's be honest. Medieval dental hygiene wasn't non-existent, but it hovered dangerously close to chaos. You glance around the tavern. Most mouths are a mess. Yellowed teeth, brown teeth, no teeth. It's a dental haunted house. So how did people clean their mouths? Surprisingly, they tried. Toothbrushes didn't exist in the modern sense, but that didn't mean people ignored oral care. You see a woman in the corner, chewing on a twig. Not boredom, this is intentional. That's a chew stick, usually made from aromatic woods like birch, hazel, or sometimes even fennel. Chewing softens the end into bristles. She gently scrapes it along her molars, humming. Chew sticks were the ancient world's toothbrush, passed down from the Egyptians to the Islamic Golden Age, and later into medieval Europe. They were cheap, effective-ish, and didn't require lye, which was always a win. Tooth powders also existed. A man at a nearby table pulls out a small leather pouch, dips his finger in, and rubs his teeth with something that smells faintly of mint and chalk. Powders could be made from crushed herbs, ashes, charcoal, or even powdered bone. Some added salt or vinegar to purify the mouth. Historians still argue whether these methods were truly effective or more ritual than reality. The abrasiveness certainly scrubbed away plaque, but also enamel. Tooth sensitivity was likely just called a Tuesday. The real enemy, however, was sugar, or rather its growing availability. In earlier centuries, sugar was so rare it was medicinal, but by the late Middle Ages, trade routes brought it in bulk. Nobles began indulging, and with indulgence came decay. Royal dental records are a horror show. Queen Elizabeth I, a bit post-medieval but still relevant, had famously blackened teeth from sugar abuse. The rot wasn't unique to her. Nobles sometimes kept rotten teeth as status symbols, proof that they could afford luxury. Across the tavern, a bard sings a song with a whistle in every S-kid. Turns out he's missing 3 front teeth. He lifts his mug in cheer, swishing ale around it like it's mouthwash. It kind of is. Alcohol was thought to kill mouth rot, and rinsing with wine or beer was common. Brushing, optional. Gargling, daily, drunkenly, even better. You take a seat and watch as a merchant unwraps a linen cloth and removes a set of tools. Tweezers, a bone pick, and what looks like an iron ice hook. It's his dental kit. He offers his companion a turn. The man leans back, opens wide, and, yep, starts yanking at something. Dental work in the Middle Ages was DIY or done by barbers. Not dentists, barbers. The same people who shaved beards, cut hair, and applied leeches were also pulling teeth in the back room. No anesthesia, just iron will and a shot of something strong. If a tooth went bad, you had 2 choices, endure or yank. Some people tied string around a loose tooth and attached it to a door. Others used hot coals to deaden the nerve before pulling. A brave few asked blacksmiths for help. Yes, blacksmiths. Outside you spot a man spitting blood into the dirt. His friend claps him on the back. Better out than in, eh? You nod sympathetically. Better out than gangrenous. One curious and rather fringe belief was that worms caused toothaches. Yes, toothworms. Tiny creatures living inside your molars, gnawing at nerves and causing agony. Some remedies involved smoking the worms out with herbs or even blowing tobacco into the mouth with a reed. People swore they saw worms wriggle out. Historians now suspect they mistook exposed root pulp for squirming. One noblewoman's journal describes placing heated copper upon the cheek to chase the creature, which sounds both ineffective and painful. You imagine medieval molars as haunted castles besieged by invisible beasts. And then there were breath remedies. Bad breath, halitosis, was a known nuisance, even if its cause wasn't. People chewed parsley, cloves, or cardamom. Some stuffed orange peels with herbs and held them under the tongue. Others chewed licorice root until their mouths went numb. You watch a group of monks pass by. One is muttering prayers, but the other is swishing something in his mouth, a blend of vinegar and rosemary. You nod approvingly, then realize you're rooting for mouthwash like it's a sports team. In the corner, a man lights a dried sage leaf and waves it near his lips. It's not a ritual. It's a desperate attempt to cleanse whatever demons live behind his gums. You exit the tavern, stomach growling, and stumble upon a bakery. The smell is heavenly. Fresh bread, roasted nuts, and something sweet, apple tarts. You buy one, take a bite, and immediately understand the dental dilemma. The sugar clings to your teeth like tar. There's no toothbrush in sight. You're medieval now. You just live with it. You glance around, looking for water. Instead, you find a communal bucket with a ladle. It's lukewarm and smells faintly of feet. You pass. Further down the lane, a tooth drawer has set up shop under a tent. His sign reads, "Pain swift, coin cheap." You hear a scream, then applause. He bows. Back then, having all your teeth was a miracle. False teeth existed but were terrifying, made from animal bone, ivory, or dead people's teeth. Yes, really. After a battle, looters would extract teeth from corpses and sell them to denture makers. If that doesn't make your molars itch, nothing will. You see a merchant with perfect teeth. Suspiciously perfect. Too white, too even. You wonder if they're borrowed. He catches your gaze and smirks. "Boar's tusks," he says, tapping them proudly. "Imported." You nod, impressed, horrified. Night falls, a chill sets in. You sit near a fire pit outside the town gate, reflecting on everything you've learned. The medieval mouth was a battlefield between herbs and rot, twigs and toothworms, vinegar and vinegar-based disasters. People tried. They really did. In a world without toothpaste, orthodontics, or even Novocaine, they found their way. They chewed, they gargled, they yanked. Sometimes they just grinned and bore it. Literally, sleep tight. You wake up to the sound of church bells echoing through the village. A slow, solemn clang that vibrates through your bones like a medieval snooze button. You sit up on a scratchy hay mattress in the corner of a tanner's shed. Your mouth feels like it's been stuffed with wool. The fire's gone cold. So has the ale in your stomach. But something else hits you first. Your armpits. You sniff cautiously. Yep. You've arrived at the next medieval hygiene horror. Body odor, and the fact that you're even thinking about it means you're already more self-aware than half the population. Time to face the facts. Deodorant didn't exist. But sweat, oh, it very much did. You step outside and immediately see a man stretching in the morning light. His linen shirt has gone stiff at the armpits. He yawns, lifts both arms, and you swear a nearby bird faints mid-flight. But to be fair, it's not his fault. Body odor wasn't just expected in medieval times. It was practically invisible to the people living with it. You've been marinating in this scent stew for days now. You're starting to adapt. Still, people did try to smell less like swamp trolls. One trick? Layering. Lots of it. Linen shifts, undershirts, tunics, cloaks. People wore layer upon layer, not just for warmth, but to absorb sweat. A well-made linen shirt was your first line of defense against becoming a human cheese wheel. You watch a washerwoman scrubbing one of those shifts at the riverbank. She dunks it repeatedly, slaps it against a flat rock, then rubs it with a handful of herbs tied in a cloth. Lavender, if you had coin. Thyme or mint if you didn't. She mutters a rhyme while doing it. You're not sure if it's for luck, or if she's slowly losing her mind at the smell. Some people used aromatic paste made from crushed flowers and wax, applied under the arms or to the chest. You spot a nobleman applying something under his shirt with a silver spatula. He smells like roses and regret. Others carried scented sachets or pomanders, small decorative balls filled with herbs or perfumes. Women might wear them tucked into their sleeves or belts. Men often attach them to chains or belts near, well, the source of the problem. You glance at a merchant with a small orb dangling from his waist. Every time he walks, it bounces gently. He's a walking potpourri piñata. Now to the fringe cures. People tried everything. Some rubbed vinegar-soaked cloths into their armpits, believing the sharp scent would kill bacteria or whatever they thought bacteria was. Others went more extreme. A man once wrote of boiling ox gall, yes, from a cow's bile, and applying it to smelly areas to restore freshness. You hope he didn't have friends. You pass a monk seated on a bench, meditating with an intense expression. You nod politely. He does not return the gesture. He's fasting and hasn't washed in weeks. Not out of laziness, but because certain religious orders believed the body's natural state was a test of spiritual purity. The smell? That was temptation leaving the body, probably. Historians still argue whether these spiritual non-bathers had any concept of microbial cleanliness, or if they just really hated comfort. It's debated whether they were admired or quietly avoided, probably both. For most peasants, especially those laboring outdoors, the smell wasn't even the issue, it was survival. When your daily routine involves hauling buckets of pig feed and your evening plans include dodging fleas, deodorant isn't high on your list. But that didn't stop people from trying something. Cleanliness was associated with dignity, even if it didn't match our modern standards. In the market square, a woman sells sprigs of sage and rosemary bundled with twine. She hands them to customers with advice like, hang it in your blouse, or boil it and bathe if you're brave. You buy one and immediately feel 5% fresher. It doesn't last. You head toward the church, hoping for sanctuary from the smell. Bad choice. You step inside and are greeted by incense, yes, but also the smell of hundreds of unwashed bodies squeezed into pews. It's a scented cocktail of humility and humanity. A choir of boys sing sweetly. One scratches his side, another yawns. None look particularly fragrant. The priest delivers a sermon about vanity, glancing meaningfully at the noblewomen fanning themselves with herbs. They smell like spice racks. The peasants smell like boiled linen and dirt. Everyone stinks in their own way. After the service, you wander behind the church to where the cleaning station sits. It's a rough wooden structure with a cold stream running through it. There's a bucket, a rag, and a bar of soap the size of a goat's hoof. You dab your face. It's cold. It helps. A man joins you, scrubbing his neck. Got a visit with the Reeve today, he says proudly. Thought I'd best freshen up. You nod, trying not to stare as he reaches for a clump of crushed mint and rubs it into his underarms. You try. This, he offers, keeps the flies off. You politely decline. Of course, there were people who rejected natural odors entirely, especially in cities. In Paris, public latrines sometimes sat next to perfume shops. Coincidence? Number genius? Absolutely. A few wealthier households even hired perfumers, yes, like live-in smell wranglers, who mixed herbal pastes, distilled flower oils, and masked the scent of rot with enough rose water to drown a camel. Royals wore gloves soaked in perfume and sent each other scent-saturated letters. Smelling good wasn't just pleasant, it was power. You watch a young nobleman strut through town, followed by a servant fanning him with a cloth soaked in clove oil. Every step releases a puff of fragrant confidence. People stare. Some sneeze. You, meanwhile, are back to sweating. A small child walks past. He stops, stares up at you, and then says with brutal honesty, "You smell like a pig got nervous." You consider your options. Maybe it's time for a bath. Again. You spot a wash tub by a bakery. Half filled, abandoned. There's a questionable film on the surface, and something is definitely moving underneath. You back away slowly. Instead, you join a group of villagers sitting near a fire. They pass around bunches of herbs, chewing on fennel seeds and mint to sweeten the sweat, as one woman puts it. Another swears that wearing a garlic clove under the arm keeps you from stinking. You don't ask whether it works or whether it just makes you smell like sweaty soup. But through it all, there's a surprising sense of self-care. These people may not have showers or roll-on antiperspirant, but they know their bodies. They adapt. They endure. And when they can, they laugh about it. As the fire crackles and stars poke through the darkening sky, someone begins singing. A gentle ballad about a woman whose beauty could stop a charging ox. If only she'd wash her feet. The others chuckle. You do too. You're all in this stinky little world together. Sleep tight. It's a new day, and your nose is fully broken in. Not literally, but functionally. Your brain has started to filter out the horror show of smells around you. The human body is adaptive like that. The medieval version of getting used to it is less about acceptance and more about surrender. And today, you've decided to tackle the most underappreciated and overused garment of the medieval world. Underwear. Or, more precisely, the lack of it. You're in a weaver's workshop now. The air is thick with the soft clatter of wooden looms and the sweet dust of flax and wool. Long strands of thread stretch across the room like spiderwebs, and women hum as they weave. Rhythms older than memory. In the corner, a bolt of soft, off-white linen catches your eye. This question mark. This is medieval gold. Because linen isn't just a fabric, it's the unsung hero of hygiene. Most folks in the Middle Ages didn't own drawers full of clothes. They had one or two outfits, tops, and at the bottom of everything, often literally touching the skin, was the linen shift, or chemise. Men wore long shirts, women wore long smocks. Both served the same purpose: protect the outer clothing from the body. But also, trap sweat, grime and body oils, and something that could be washed easily and more often than, say, a velvet tunic with silver buttons and 5 layers of existential weight. You glance over at a laundry line behind the shop. Linen shifts flap lazily in the breeze like medieval surrender flags. They're all off-white, some patched with darker cloth, others faintly green from grass soap or herbs. Historians note that linen shifts were considered underwear by medieval standards, meaning no one wanted to see them, but everyone needed them. You catch a glimpse of a peasant man on the road, stripped down to just his shirt as he hauls firewood. It clings to him in the worst possible way. He either doesn't care or has long given up. And here's the thing. These shifts weren't washed every day. Maybe once a week, maybe less. Water was scarce. Firewood to heat it was expensive, and no one had a closet full of backups. So what happens when you wear the same linen shift every day, sweat in it, sleep in it, and maybe occasionally use it as a towel? That thing becomes alive. It becomes a pet, a gross, cottony pet. Now let's talk underwear in the modern sense. Underpants, briefs, drawers. Most medieval people didn't wear them, or if they did, it was shockingly rudimentary. A triangle of cloth, a belt, some string. The word braise comes to mind for men's linen breeches, but they were more like loose boxer shorts. Comfortable, maybe? Clean? Let's not go there yet. Women, especially peasants, often wore nothing under their shifts. Why? Because if you've got to lift your skirts to relieve yourself in the field, layers only slow you down. Practicality wins. This brings us to the medieval washerwoman, a career built on battling stains so terrible they could bring a grown knight to tears. These women hauled linen to rivers, pounded it on stones, boiled it in lye, and beat it senseless with wooden paddles. You pass one now, elbow deep in soapy water, muttering what sounds like curses and prayers at the same time. She glances up. Shift stains, she grumbles. Some of these men don't know what a bath is. You smile sympathetically and back away quickly. A noblewoman walks past with a servant carrying a basket of fresh linen. The edges are embroidered with her family's crest. Her shifts are custom made. Her sweat presumably is nobler. But it's not just about function. Linen was tied to modesty. Sleeping without a shift? Indecent. Being seen in just your shift in public? Embarrassing. Getting married without a fresh linen chemise? Basically a crime against your mother. You arrive at a tailor's stall. A young man is selling padded doublets and thick wool cloaks. He leans in, whispering, "And I've got French linen? Real soft. Smuggled past 3 toll gates." You touch the fabric. It's buttery, smooth. It smells like lavender and crime. You want it. Linen also had a strange sort of spiritual reputation. Some monks believed that wearing rougher fabrics, like hair shirts or coarse wool, purified the soul through discomfort. Others believed that linen, being cleaner and closer to purity, was spiritually superior. The arguments raged in cloisters. Meanwhile, villagers just wanted something that didn't itch. You peek inside a small cottage where a young couple is preparing for their wedding night. The bride is folding a freshly washed shift, her cheeks pink. It's been steeped in rose water. Her groom pretends not to notice, but he's clearly checking to make sure his best tunic doesn't smell like goat again. It's sweet. It's also rare. For most people, nighttime meant curling up in whatever you wore that day. Shift, tunic, mud stains and all. You weren't undressing so much as repositioning yourself for sleep. And yes, linen was absorbent, but it didn't kill odor. After a while, a shift becomes a wearable history book of everything you've eaten, sweated, touched, or panicked through. You pass a man scratching under his armpit with a chicken feather. His shirt has more holes than fabric. You don't judge. Now onto something darker. Punishment by clothing. In some towns, public shaming involved making someone strip down to their shift and parade through the streets. This wasn't about nudity, it was about humiliation. To be seen in your linen was like being caught in your underwear during a job interview. Multiply that by 100. Add tomatoes. You get the idea. Historians still argue whether medieval folks wore underpants with regularity or only during travel, illness, or military service. Some surviving examples suggest yes. Others insist no. What's certain is that the closer to the skin the clothing was, the more invisible and intimate it became. And now, as you walk back into town, you notice something funny. People are always adjusting their layers. Tugging, scratching, smoothing. Not out of vanity, but necessity. Medieval clothes didn't fit well. They weren't stretchy. They didn't breathe. And once you started sweating, well, the wind picks up and a woman yells as her linen shift, drying on a line, flies into the street. It wraps around a goat. The goat panics. Chaos ensues. You help retrieve it. The shift is unrecoverable. The woman sighs, looks skyward, and mutters, "That was my good one." You nod solemnly. It's only linen. But to her, it was everything. Sleep tight. The wind hasn't let up, and it's doing its best to turn every piece of fabric into an airborne projectile. You dodge a flying bonnet, sidestep a runaway apron, and finally take shelter near a stone building with an overhang. You've reached a turning point. Because now, we talk toilets. Or more precisely, the total and complete lack of them. It starts with a simple, innocent thought. Where do you go when you need to go? In medieval towns, the answer is usually anywhere you can without being arrested or cursed by a priest. Welcome to the thrilling world of waste disposal. The first thing you notice is the smell. Not just a faint hint of something unpleasant, but a deep, earthy, musky fog that clings to your nose, hairs like a second skin. It's not constant, but it lingers, like a ghost, a poop ghost. Let's begin with the basics, the garderobe. You see one now. It's a small stone outcropping on the side of a castle wall, sticking out like a nose over a river. It looks like a weird little balcony with a wooden seat inside. That's a medieval toilet. A hole in a bench, maybe a bit of hay, and a long vertical drop into whatever lies below. Garderobes literally mean guard your robes, because before the age of plumbing, robes needed to be well out of the way. Otherwise, things got messy. Think of it as a gravity-powered shame tunnel. You peek inside a small fortress. The garderobe room is chilly, always chilly, and the wind that rushes up the shaft is known, unironically, as the garderobe breeze. Chilly, but oddly effective at reminding you not to dawdle. Some noble households even line the shaft with stone to prevent splashing. Others? Wood. And some just let it drip. Right down the side of the tower. Onto the courtyard, where the geese live. And you wondered why the geese are always so angry. For the lower classes who didn't have towers or breezes, the solution was simpler. The chamber pot. A humble ceramic bowl kept under beds, behind curtains, beside fires. When it filled up, you'd take it outside and dump it wherever you could get away with it. And when we say outside, we don't mean a proper disposal site. We mean the gutter, the alley, a ditch, a bush. Or, if you're feeling bold, right out the window. A child near you yells something from an upstairs window. "Guardy Lou!" You leap sideways. A moment later, the contents of a chamber pot splash into the street. You nod. The warning was appreciated, if not prompt. The concept of toilet etiquette was different. You could be fined for dumping waste onto someone's property or in a marketplace, but only if someone caught you. Otherwise, it was medieval littering, with consequences mostly for the next person who stepped in it. Historians still argue whether public attitudes toward human waste were more laissez-faire or deeply shame-based. There's evidence for both. Some towns had laws against urinating near churches. Others designated public urinals. But for the average peasant, nature was your lavatory. In the city of London, open sewers known as cesspits and muck trenches ran through the streets. Some were technically underground, but underground in the loosest sense. They often overflowed. Rainstorms were like nature's plumbing system, except the pipes were ditches and the water brought everything up, not down. You pass a man with a cart labeled night soil. He tips his hat. His job. Collecting waste from homes and cesspits and carting it out of town, often to be used as fertilizer. You've just met a gong farmer. Yes, that's the real name. It's also, without question, one of the worst jobs in medieval history. Gong farmers worked at night, hauling literal tons of excrement out of cities. The pay was decent, because no one else wanted to do it. The smell? Indescribable. The risk? High? Cesspits could collapse. Gases could ignite. Men drowned in human waste. It happened. The man waves and moves on, whistling. You admire his optimism. In monasteries, latrines were often communal. Rows of seats in stone rooms, all lined up like a spiritual poop choir. Monks sat silently, robes tucked up, contemplating life while the waste ran through stone channels underneath, often leading to rivers. You step into one such latrine now, empty in the morning light. It's eerily peaceful. A place of reflection, even. The walls are carved with old graffiti, names, prayers, crude jokes about abbots. Someone drew a pig with a halo. You don't ask. There's no toilet paper, of course. Instead, moss, straw, rags, leftover fabric, and yes, communal sponges on sticks. In some parts of Europe, people even use smooth stones or broken pottery shards. You spot a pile of such wipeware near the entrance. You back away slowly. Let's not forget the outdoor lifestyle. If you're working the fields all day, you're not hiking back home every time nature calls. You find a spot behind a hedge, do your business, and maybe toss a leaf over it. Maybe. In cities, public urinals appeared in the later medieval period. Stone walls with grooves designed to channel urine into ditches. Some were elegant. Most were just wet. You walk by one now and notice a man humming cheerfully, arms folded behind his back as he lets nature take its course. You keep walking. There were even toilet customs among nobles. Some wealthier folks had toilet thrones, elaborate wooden chairs with velvet cushions and a removable chamber pot underneath. These thrones were mobile, which meant someone else had the job of carrying them away when full. Usually a servant, or an unlucky cousin. You reach a castle courtyard where a noblewoman sits primly on her throne chair. She's reading a poem while sipping rosewater. You slowly realize the throne is functional. She nods at you. You nod back and move on, thoroughly disturbed. In taverns, people just used buckets behind curtains, or went outside. Drinking all night? The alley becomes your personal latrine. Mourning becomes someone else's problem. Despite it all, there were efforts to improve sanitation. Certain guilds and councils tried to regulate waste. Bathhouses enforced some cleanliness, and eventually cities began experimenting with actual sewers. But in your current time and place, that dream is many centuries away. The funniest part? People did complain about the smell. Chroniclers described foul stenches, air poisoned by rot, and gagging fumes rising from the streets. One writer in the 14th century Paris described the stench as assaulting the heavens, which is poetic and accurate. As the day fades, you sit on a low stone wall at the village's edge, watching the sun set over dung heaps, puddles, and geese. Everything smells faintly of onions, livestock, and secrets. A dog sniffs a pile of something that you hope is mud. A child skips past holding a chamber pot like it's a treasure. You've survived another day of medieval sanitation. No flush handles, no privacy, no citrus-scented anything. But at least you've gained perspective. And possibly tetanus. Sleep tight. You're awake again, but this time with a different kind of fear. Not from lice, not from the smell wafting out of someone's armpit at dawn, and not even from the terrifying proximity of that chamber pot above your sleeping nook last night. No, today your fear is medical. You have a splinter. And in the Middle Ages, that could be a life-threatening situation. You hobble through the village square toward a small wooden shop, with a striped banner flapping in the breeze. On it, a red and white pole, twisting, swirling, innocuous to modern eyes. But here, it's a warning label in full display. The barber surgeon is in. You push aside a hanging curtain made of stained linen and step inside. The smell of old blood, boiled herbs, and something disturbingly sweet hits you immediately. A man is sharpening knives. Another is rinsing a bowl filled with something reddish that you refuse to look too closely at. Got a splinter, you mutter. The barber grins. You're lucky. Yesterday I pulled a goat tooth out of a monk's thigh. You don't ask. Here's the thing about medieval medicine. It was more art than science. Less do no harm, and more try not to kill them before the infection does. Barbers were the multitaskers of the era. They cut hair, trimmed beards, performed tooth extractions, minor surgeries, even bloodletting, all without anesthesia, sterile tools, or anything resembling modern training. The red and white pole? Symbolic. Red for blood, white for bandages. The pole itself was gripped by patients during bloodletting so they wouldn't pass out and hit the floor, which they still sometimes did. As you sit down, the barber pulls out a small iron probe and pokes at your finger. This'll sting, he says. Or maybe not. Depends how God feels today. You brace yourself and scream. The splinter's out, but now your hand is wrapped in something that smells like mold and vinegar. You're given a shot of aqua vitae, strong alcohol originally meant for spiritual clarity, but now used as an impromptu painkiller. It works. Kinda. People in the Middle Ages didn't really understand germs. They believed in the four humors: blood, phlegm, yellow bile, and black bile. Balance was key. If you were sick, your humors were off. The solution? Adjust them. Got a fever? Too much blood. Let's drain some. Got a chill? Probably phlegm. Take a hot herbal bath and a prayer. You see a man sitting in the corner with leeches crawling up his arm. He looks peaceful, or unconscious. Leeches were used in bloodletting, which was one of the most common treatments for almost everything. Headaches, fevers, fatigue, even melancholy. The belief? Remove excess blood, restore balance. Historians still argue whether this practice helped, harmed, or simply delayed the inevitable. Some suggest mild bloodletting occasionally helped with inflammation. Others say it was medieval snake oil with extra blood loss. In another corner of the room, a woman lays still while the barber stitches up a nasty gash. No gloves, no antiseptic. He hums. She bites on a stick. Surgery was often a last resort. There were no painkillers beyond alcohol, opium, if you were very lucky or very rich, or biting something until your teeth cracked. And yet, people survived. The body is weird like that. You leave the shop with your hand bandaged and your pride in shreds. A man outside is selling dried frog skins as fever patches. You do not buy one. Let's talk physicians, the fancy doctors of the era. If you were rich, you might hire one. They wore long robes, sometimes fur-lined, and carried ornate staffs. They rarely touched patients. Too risky. Instead, they observed, took your pulse, examined your urine, often by color, smell, and sometimes taste, yes, taste, and then prescribed things like crushed pearls, powdered horn, or cooling herbs steeped in goat's milk. You glance over at a cart filled with bottles and scrolls. A man in a tall hat is waving a sprig of rue over a sick boy. He chants softly and scribbles something on a parchment. The boy sneezes. The man gasps and declares the humor's balanced. The mother weeps with joy. You nod and walk away slowly. Apothecaries were medieval pharmacists mixing potions, salves, and powders. Some knew their craft. Others didn't. You see one grinding dried beetles with honey and calling it a love tonic. Another stirs a boiling pot of mystery ingredients while reciting Latin. Toothaches? Burn a dog's tooth and inhale the smoke. Earaches? Warm onion juice. Stomach pains? Rub warm bread on your belly and whisper to Saint Apollonia. Sure, it sounds ridiculous now, but they were doing the best they could with what they had. You pass a man with bandaged feet, hopping painfully. Cursed turnips, he mutters. You don't ask for context. Back in the square, a small crowd gathers around a traveling quack doctor, a showman dressed in bells and feathers, offering miracle cures from a wooden crate. He promises his tonic can cure gout, plague, heartbreak, and the pox that whispers. You're tempted. But then he drinks it himself and immediately vomits. The crowd cheers. Show's over. Meanwhile, midwives and wise women carried much of the real medical knowledge, especially for childbirth, women's health, and herbal care. They were often trusted more than doctors, even if they weren't officially recognized. You see one now, a stooped old woman with a pouch full of roots and a walking stick carved with runes. Kids run from her. Adults nod respectfully. She offers you a poultice for your hand. You take it. It smells like boiled socks, but it works. The pain fades. You thank her. And just like that, you understand medieval medicine a little more. It wasn't about cures. It was about coping. About doing something, anything, to feel less helpless. Even if that meant swallowing frog powder, applying goat butter, or getting your humors bled into a bowl by a man who also trims beards. The sun dips lower. A bell tolls. Somewhere, a man sneezes violently and everyone within earshot steps back 3 paces. You wrap your hand tighter and head home. You're not healed. You're medieval. Sleep tight. You wake up tucked beneath a wool blanket that smells faintly of smoke, sheep, and someone else's dreams. A rooster crows outside. Your hand still aches from yesterday's splinter surgery / exorcism, but that's the least of your worries now. because today you're a woman. Or rather, today you're going to follow the life of a woman in medieval times, and specifically how she handled hygiene in a world designed by men with zero interest in the phrase personal care routine. You step into a modest cottage. A woman in her early 20s is already up stoking the fire. Her name is Alice. Her hair is neatly braided, her linen shift tucked under a faded wool overdress, and she's humming while she wipes her face with a damp cloth. There's no mirror. She doesn't need one. She gestures for you to follow. Welcome to the world of medieval women's hygiene. Equal parts secretive, sacred, and savagely under-resourced. Let's start with the topic no one talked about, but everyone had to deal with. Menstruation. You wouldn't find menstrual pads in the village market or tampons behind the blacksmiths. What you would find were rags, scraps of linen, often repurposed from worn-out shifts, folded and tucked into belts or bands tied between the legs. These were washed and reused until they fell apart. You glance at Alice's wash basin, where several pale cloths soak in a bucket of warm water and vinegar. She's already boiled them this week. She doesn't complain. It's just part of life. But let's be real, laundry was labor, especially when done in secret. Because while menstruation wasn't always considered sinful, it was seen as unclean. And depending on where you were, rules about church attendance during a period ranged from gently discouraged to nope, stay home and pray from the hedgerow. Historians still argue whether this exclusion was based more on theological ideas of purity or just a medieval discomfort with blood in general. Some evidence suggests women created support networks to help each other through it. Shared cloths, advice, and quiet spaces to rest. Others suggest they simply worked through the pain. And speaking of pain, cramps. Without Advil or heating pads, women used herbal remedies. You spot dried mugwort, yarrow, and sage hanging from the ceiling. Brewed into teas or rubbed onto the abdomen with warm oil, they were the medieval equivalent of curl up and breathe through it. You notice Alice slipping a sprig of dried lavender into her belt. Not just for scent, but for protection. Folk tradition claimed it warded off evil spirits and foul odors. Outside, you meet another woman, Agnes, older, sharp-eyed, with a cloth bundle in her hands. She's the local midwife. She helps deliver babies, treat infections, and, on occasion, whisper fiercely at rude husbands. Midwives were essential. More than just birth attendants, they were guardians of women's hygiene, health, and secrets. You follow her to a nearby cottage where a mother cradles a newborn, barely an hour old. The room smells of iron, milk, and damp straw. A faint smile curls on the woman's lips. You learned something in that moment. Clean meant survival. Midwives often carried herbal mixtures to wash birthing areas. Chamomile, warm vinegar, sometimes rosewater if they could afford it. They cleaned wounds with wine, burned herbs to purify the air, and whispered prayers to saints like Margaret or Bridget. And once a woman gave birth, she entered a period called lying in, a time to rest, heal, and, crucially, not bathe. Yes, you heard that right, because the prevailing belief was that washing after birth could let bad humors or cold winds enter the body and cause madness, bleeding, or worse. So, instead of cleaning with water, women surrounded themselves in it. Steam baths, herbal compresses, warm blankets. Sweat was seen as a purging process, a healing one. Bathing was feared, and yet they survived. You sit with Alice later, watching as she braids her hair tightly. Clean hair was essential, especially during menstruation. Some believed that uncombed hair invited bad luck. She uses a simple wooden comb and a bit of vinegar water. Her fingers move quickly, precisely, and then she does something surprising. She shares her comb with her younger sister. They joke, giggle, and pick out each other's lice with the practiced ease of people who've done this 100 times. It's gross, it's tender, it's human. Personal hygiene for women was a group project. Mothers taught daughters. Sisters helped sisters. Friends whispered tips in the candlelight. There were no YouTube tutorials, but the knowledge passed on. Quietly, faithfully. Some fringe beliefs, though, unhinged. One 13th century medical text advised women to wear the skin of a weasel during their period to prevent excessive flow. Another claimed that placing a roasted toad under the bed would draw the sickness from the womb. No, we don't recommend trying this, even in 2025. Other texts suggested drinking red wine during menstruation to replenish the lost blood. That one at least sounds mildly pleasant, if wildly medically inaccurate. You follow Aylis to church where she stands outside while others go in. Today's a no entry day. Instead, she kneels beside a tree, hands clasped. Her faith isn't weaker, just redirected. Later, you help her hang linens on a rope behind the cottage. Some have faint stains. She doesn't care. They dry in the breeze beside tunics, socks, and a shirt with more holes than fabric. You sit on a log as she rubs her hands with rosemary water. Her nails are trimmed. Her skin's dry from soap root scrubbing. She's exhausted and proud. And there's one more truth about hygiene in a medieval woman's world. It was never just about the body. It was about dignity. Every cloth folded, every braid tied, every bitter herb chewed was an act of resilience in a world that offered few comforts. Women carved out spaces of control, tiny, fragrant acts of rebellion. As the stars appear, Aylis braids her hair for sleep. She dabs her temples with a rag soaked in chamomile. She lays her shift over a chair. It's patched, worn thin, and still warm from her skin. You realize something. Medieval women didn't have less hygiene. They had a different relationship with it. Quieter, fiercer, more communal, and somehow beautifully personal. You lie back, the smell of herbs and hearth smoke curling into your dreams. Sleep tight. Sleep! Morning light spills over the village rooftops, and a fine mist lingers in the air like nature's attempt at air freshener. It's market day, and you're standing at the edge of a bustling square. But your attention isn't on the piles of turnips or the lady aggressively shouting about onions. It's on the sign swinging above a crooked wooden doorway. Saint. Agnes's bathhouse. Cleanliness, company, cabbage soup. You step inside and immediately the air wraps around you like a heavy, wet wool cloak. The room is thick with steam, the scent of lavender oil, old wood, and something else. Possibly wet dog. Possibly regret. Welcome to the medieval public bathhouse, the steamiest, strangest, and arguably most misunderstood piece of hygiene history. At first glance, it looks like a spa. People are reclining in large wooden tubs. Some are chatting, some are sleeping, a few are eating. One man's got a bowl of cabbage soup resting on the edge of his tub, like it's completely normal to dine half submerged in tepid water. Spoiler, it was. Bathhouses weren't just places to clean your body. They were social hubs, gossip centers, business meeting rooms, low-key date spots. If you were lucky enough to live in a town that had one, you went there not just to bathe, but to exist among other humans who also hated smelling like goats. You're handed a small bundle by the attendant, a linen towel, a bar of soap, more like a lump, really, and a wooden ladle. You nod politely and walk toward an open basin. The tubs vary in size. Some are for individuals, others for couples, and one looks big enough for a full family reunion. People aren't shy. They strip down, splash, scrub, and chat as if nudity were as common as bad bread. You ease into a lukewarm tub next to an older man who offers you a boiled carrot and a hearty grin. "You new?" he asks. You nod. "Don't mind the floating leaves," he says, pointing to the rosemary and sage floating around you. "They keep the fleas away." Bathhouses like this were common across Europe, especially from the 12th to 15th centuries. Contrary to modern belief, medieval folks didn't avoid bathing altogether. They just didn't do it privately. Private tubs were rare and expensive. Public baths? Much more affordable, plus you didn't have to chop the firewood yourself. In places like Hungary, Germany, and even parts of England, bathhouses operated regularly. Some cities even required them by law. Towns had bathhouse inspectors. Regulations were posted. Towels were optional. Some bathhouses were gender segregated. Others, not so much. In fact, you glance over and see a man and woman sharing a tub, sipping wine from the same cup, grinning at each other like it's their third date and no one's supervising. And here's the sticky part. Bathhouses had a reputation. By the late Middle Ages, especially during and after outbreaks of the plague, public baths began to be viewed with suspicion. Disease spread in tight, steamy spaces. And more than that, moral decay became a concern. Because for all their good intentions, many bathhouses blurred the line between hygiene and hedonism. Some offered extras. Some had back rooms. Some simply turned into full-blown brothels with tubs. You hear a woman giggle behind a curtain. The attendant rolls his eyes. "Always with the giggling," he mutters, then ladles more hot water into your tub. This is where things got tricky. Religious authorities, particularly in more conservative regions, began clamping down. Bathhouses were condemned as dens of sin. Some were shut down entirely. Others rebranded as healing centers or moved to more rural locations. Historians still argue whether these moral panics were justified or simply part of the church's broader effort to control pleasure. Either way, by the 16th century, many public bathhouses in Northern Europe had closed or fallen into disrepair. But for now, in your little corner of history, the bathhouse is thriving. You strike up a conversation with the woman across from you. She's rubbing a paste of ash and lard onto her arms. "Draws out the filth," she explains. "Also good for boils." You nod like you understand. You do not. A pair of musicians enters and begins to play a lute and a hand drum. The mood shifts. Someone sings a drinking song. A man passes around hot wine in a chipped ceramic jug. You realize you're at a party, and it's happening in a bath. You dry off with your scratchy linen towel and walk into the cooling chamber. Here, people sit in robes, sip broth, and let the heat fade slowly from their skin. It's oddly peaceful, a kind of medieval wellness retreat, minus the cucumber water and inspirational quotes on the walls. One woman leans back, eyes closed. "I feel 10 years younger," she sighs. Her friend nods. "I haven't smelled this nice since Pentecost." There's a bowl of dried herbs near the door. Bay leaf, lavender, wormwood. You're supposed to take a pinch and rub it into your hands. You do so. It smells sharp and earthy. You're officially fresher than you've been in days. And now for the fringe fun. Some bathhouses believed in hydrotherapy. Different tubs with varying temperatures, even herbal infusions. You walk past a series of barrels labeled with chalk. Boil thy bones. Very hot, river of sighs. Comfortably warm, cold as a widow's glance. Freezing. You dip a toe into the last one. Immediate regret. Some attendants offered massage, scrubbing, or even light cupping therapy with warmed glass or horns. One man is currently being whacked with birch branches. It's apparently invigorating. He yells like a goat giving birth and then thanks the attendant. By the time you leave, you're red-faced, vaguely dizzy, and cleaner than you've been since you fell into that puddle of pig runoff last week. You step back into the square. The air feels different, crisper, like it's giving you a second chance. But as you pass a group of villagers, one woman lifts an eyebrow and says, "Someone went to St. Agnes's." You smile, because in this town, smelling good is news. Sleep tight. The bells toll again, slower this time. Not for danger, not for celebration, just for routine. In a world where time is kept by shadows and chimes, you grow to appreciate the rhythm of the bells. You're walking along the outskirts of the village now, following a narrow dirt path toward a cluster of stone buildings surrounded by low stone walls and whispering fields of barley. A gentle hush falls over the air. It's peaceful, serene, and just a little ominous. You've arrived at the monastery. Time to discover how hygiene worked in a world driven by devotion, ritual, and, let's be honest, a good amount of holy peer pressure. As you cross the threshold, you're greeted not by shouting, clanging, or street stench, but by silence. Purposeful silence. A young monk nods at you, places a finger over his lips, and continues sweeping the flagstone floor. You follow the quiet hum of daily life deeper into the compound. The monastery is immaculate. By medieval standards, at least. The gardens are tidy, the walkways are swept, and someone is actually washing something. Revolutionary. This, you learn, is because monks took hygiene seriously. Not for luxury, but for piety. The rule of Saint Benedict, followed by many monastic communities, includes detailed guidance on cleanliness. Monks were expected to bathe, not frequently, mind you, but more regularly than most peasants. Hair and beard were trimmed, clothes washed on rotation, and hands and feet cleaned before meals and prayers. In the cloister courtyard, a few monks sit on low stools, washing their feet in small wooden basins. One splashes his toes with rose-scented water, looking mildly guilty about it. Another mumbles a prayer while scrubbing with what looks like salt and sage. The line between hygiene and holiness here is very, very thin. And yes, washing wasn't just about dirt. It was a spiritual act. You clean yourself to approach God. You cleanse your hands before turning the pages of sacred texts. You remove the soil of the flesh to nourish the soul. You peek into the lavatorium, a communal washing space often located near the refectory. Stone basins run along the wall, each with a brass spigot or simple pipe. Water flows from a cistern above, carefully rationed. Before meals, every monk stops here. Hands, face, maybe a quick splash to the neck. There's a stack of linen towels rotated daily. It's the medieval version of washing up before dinner, just with more Latin chants and less concern about who left the soap wet. Speaking of soap, monasteries often made their own, from animal fat, ash, and fragrant herbs. You spot a soaper monk stirring a bubbling cauldron over a fire. He hums a tune as he adds sprigs of lavender and a little mint. It smells oddly yet delightful. He offers you a lump the size of a potato. It's rough, lumpy, and smells like determination. You thank him. In the dormitory, rows of straw-stuffed mattresses line the walls. Each monk has a robe, a blanket, and a small chest. Simplicity is everything, but so is order. Robes are shaken out every morning, aired if possible, and mended regularly. You run a hand over a robe hanging on a peg. It's clean. Not just less dirty, but actually clean. You're stunned. You join the monks for a meal. Silence continues. Before eating, each dips fingers in a shallow basin, dries with a shared towel, and bows their head. The food is simple: bread, beans, maybe some fish. But the ritual? Immaculate. There's a subtle pride in monastic hygiene. Not flashy, not for show. But a quiet, constant effort to maintain order, because disorder in the medieval mind is where sin begins. That said, not all religious attitudes toward hygiene were glowing. In some extreme orders, especially among hermits and anchorites, bathing was considered vain. Physical discomfort was embraced. Dirt was part of the suffering. One famous holy woman wore an iron chain so tight it embedded into her flesh, and she never removed it, even to clean. Another saint reportedly avoided washing for years, believing that filth brought her closer to divine suffering. People followed her around just to witness the stink. It was a vibe. Historians still debate how widespread this anti-hygiene holiness really was. Some say it was fringe, an outlier. Others argue it reflected a real tension between physical and spiritual cleanliness that ran through medieval Christianity like a fault line. You wander into the scriptorium, a place of writing, copying, and absolute reverence. A monk dips his pen into ink and copies letters with care. His fingers are stained but not filthy. A cloth lies nearby for wiping his hands. Cleanliness here is practical. It protects the parchment. A nearby brother reads aloud from a text while another turns pages with gloved hands. You realize something. This is hygiene for preservation. Of words. Of truth. of sacred thought. Even in death, cleanliness mattered. Monks washed the bodies of the deceased with herbs and oils. They wrapped them in linen. They buried them with reverence. Dirt might be everywhere in life, but not in the final hour. Outside you find the latrines, a row of stone seats with channels underneath. Water flows gently, fed by a spring or diverted stream. It's shockingly modern. You even spot a rudimentary flushing system. Nothing fancy, just clever engineering. It's cool, it's clean, it smells faintly of moss and ash. You sit on a bench under a pear tree. A young novice walks past carrying fresh linens to the washing shed. He hums a tune, something light. He looks content, and you start to realize why monastic hygiene worked. It wasn't just about cleanliness, it was about rhythm. Wash, pray, eat, wash again. It was woven into the schedule like stitches in a robe. They weren't perfect. There were lice. There was disease. There were times when the rules were ignored or forgotten. But compared to the mud-slick chaos of the outside world, this place smells like peace. Sleep tight. You leave the monastery feeling vaguely cleansed, spiritually, mentally, and maybe even physically. You still smell faintly of lye soap and rosemary, which is practically high society by medieval standards. But now it's time to rejoin the real world. And by real world, we mean pests. You're back in the village now, walking past hay carts and squawking geese, and you start to notice something. A twitch in the corner of your eye. A flick of movement on a thatched roof. A tiny black dot disappearing into the folds of someone's cloak. Welcome to medieval pest control. It is exactly as chaotic as you imagine. Let's begin with the greatest hit. Fleas. They're everywhere. On people, on animals, in bedding, in your shoes, on your face if you sit too long. And it's not because people were lazy or indifferent. It's because medieval homes were warm, unwashed, and stuffed full of delicious, blood-filled creatures. Including you. You pass a cottage where a woman is shaking out a thick wool blanket like it personally insulted her. She's muttering under her breath. Fleas jump from the cloth like they've been launched. One lands on your arm. You slap it on instinct. She nods at you approvingly. Fast hands, she says. You'll live longer. Then there are lice. You've met them before. They're intimate, clingy, and hard to break up with. People combed through each other's hair as casually as sharing bread. Delousing wasn't a chore, it was bonding. In fact, you walk past a group of women sitting in a circle, chatting softly while they comb and pick at one another's scalps. A fire crackles nearby. There's laughter. One woman flicks a louse into the flames like a popcorn kernel. A quiet hiss, a soft cheer, then come the real villains. Rats. You hear them before you see them. Skittering claws over wooden beams, scratching inside a cart, the soft thud of something falling off a shelf. One darts across your path and disappears into a gap under the tavern. Rats were smart, bold, resourceful, and utterly unbothered by the humans whose food they stole, whose clothes they chewed, and whose faces they occasionally nibbled during sleep. People tried to fight back. You pass a stall selling rat stones, small pebbles blessed by a wandering friar and guaranteed, probably, to ward off vermin. A man buys one, kisses it, and places it under his child's mattress. The child does not look convinced. Cats, thankfully, were plentiful. In some villages, they were seen as protectors. In others, they were accused of witchcraft and driven off. You spot one now, sleek, smug, sitting atop a barrel like it owns the entire block. A pile of rat tails lies at its feet. You nod. Respect. Dogs help too, especially in the countryside. Big, shaggy mutts with loud barks and zero fear. But not all pests ran on four legs. Let's talk bedbugs. Oh yes, they're in the hay. In the straw. In the mattress you just barely managed to sleep on last night. You didn't see them, but you definitely felt them. Little nibbles at the edge of sleep. A burning itch in the morning. How did people handle it? They aired out bedding in the sun, beat it with sticks, rubbed herbs into the seams. Some poured vinegar into the mattress. Others placed cloves, rosemary, or tansy under their pillows. A few even lined bedposts with garlic paste. It didn't always work, but at least your bed smelled like a salami. Historians still argue whether pest infestations were considered a major problem or just a fact of life. Some households went to extremes, scrubbing walls with ash, sleeping off the floor, or lining clothing with powdered mint. Others simply shrugged, scratched, and moved on. Now for the fringe stuff. You hear a man shouting in the square, holding up a large, hand-painted sign. He's selling plague-proof charms, carved bones tied with red string, supposedly effective against fleas, rats, and evil dreams. A crowd gathers. One woman asks, "Do they work?" He replies, "They kept me alive, didn't they?" She looks him up and down. He's missing 2 fingers and 1 eyebrow. She still buys one. Other pest control solutions included burning poisonous herbs like wormwood or rue to fumigate a room, letting snakes roam a cellar to chase out rats. Nope. Rubbing goose grease behind the ears to keep lice from climbing up. Double nope. Keeping a dead owl nailed above the door to ward off rodents. You really don't want to know what that smells like after 2 days. You peek into a barn where a boy is sprinkling a powder along the walls. It's crushed eggshells mixed with pepper and ashes. His grandmother says it keeps scorpions away. There are no scorpions here, but he doesn't want to take chances. You're getting itchy just watching all this. By now, you've developed the medieval twitch, a quick shoulder flick anytime you feel a tickle. False alarm? Maybe, but maybe not. A beggar walks past with a cloak so alive it practically wriggles. He doesn't scratch. He's accepted his fate. And here's the wild part. Despite all this, people still cared. They combed, they cleaned, they prayed. Not because they thought they could win, but because doing something was better than giving up. You step into a cottage where a woman boils vinegar with sage, dipping a cloth and wiping down the table, the windowsills, even the doorframe. "Keeps the ants away," she says. You nod and wonder, are medieval ants different? Bigger? Organized? You never find out. As night falls, you curl up in your very well-inspected hay pile. You tuck rosemary under your blanket. You check your sleeves. You whisper a warning to any flea thinking about wandering up your leg. Then you lie back, eyes wide, and hear the rats in the rafters playing tag with your sanity. Sleep tight. The dawn is red and low, and you awaken to a distant, unmistakable sound. One that silences birds, freezes villagers mid-step, and leaves you with a pit in your very medieval stomach. The church bell rings in sets of 4, then 5, then silence. The rhythm is wrong, too heavy, too urgent. You look around. Doors are shut. Windows closed. Even the goats look tense. You hear a whisper behind you. The plague's come back. And just like that, you're in the darkest corner of hygiene history. The Black Death, that grim old friend, has returned. It isn't the first time. It won't be the last. But this time, you're living through the stink, the panic, and the desperate, often ridiculous attempts to stay clean and safe. Let's set the scene. It's the mid-14th century. Something is sweeping through Europe, killing millions. You don't know it's Yersinia pestis, carried by fleas, riding rats, crossing borders on ships and carts and boots. All you know is people are dying, and fast. And when people die in massive, unexplainable numbers, the first thing they do, they blame the air. Bad air, they say. Miasma. Invisible poisons floating on the wind. You don't need to understand microbes to know that rotting things stink and sickness follows stench. The logic is flawed, but honestly not that far off. So you start trying to clean the air. You walk past a house where herbs hang from every window. Lavender, rosemary, sage, even bundles of sweet flag and garlic. Inside, a woman boils vinegar with thyme, waving a cloth to waft the steam into every room. She's sweating, her eyes are wild. She believes this will save her family. Outside, you spot a plague doctor. Yes, that iconic figure. Beaked mask, long robe, leather gloves. He carries a wooden stick to poke people without touching them. His mask is stuffed with flowers and spices. You catch a whiff, rose petals, clove, cinnamon. It's like a walking potpourri demon. Historians still argue whether the plague mask was widely used or just theatrical, but the image stuck for a reason. It's terrifying, it's oddly beautiful, and it's utterly useless at stopping infection, but great at making people feel safer. You pass a group of men burning barrels of sulfur in the square. The smoke is thick and awful. Someone's shouting that it will choke out the bad air. You cough and step back. Another man fans the smoke toward a chicken coop. The chickens seem unimpressed. Personal hygiene shifts fast. Suddenly, everyone is obsessed with bathing, but not in water. That might open the pores. Instead, they dry bathe. They rub down with vinegar-soaked cloths, herbs, and spices. They wear fresh linen and change it often. A luxury for the rich, a desperate effort for the poor. You see a young woman rubbing her hands raw with rosemary water. Her brother dips his fingers in alcohol before touching anything. He's convinced it works. You don't argue. Fear has created a new kind of cleanliness. Ritualistic, paranoid, and oddly hopeful. People stop shaking hands, stop hugging, stop attending church. They start fumigating their homes, burning pine resin, juniper, even dung. Yes, flaming dung to drive away death. You pass a man swinging a censer, muttering prayers, the smoke rising in circles around his head. Behind him, a priest blesses a bucket of vinegar. It's then used to mop doorways. Another house is being scrubbed top to bottom with salt and ash. The family inside hasn't left in days. They're healthy, they think. At the edge of the village, you find the sick. They're kept outside the walls. Tents, makeshift huts, even holes dug into the hillside. They lie there, coughing, sweating, praying. You offer water. One woman shakes her head and whispers, "Don't touch me." Her eyes are clear. Her skin? Spotted. You step back. People hang signs on doors. Deus meus miserere. God have mercy. Others draw crosses in ash above thresholds. One man paints a black X on his livestock. For protection, or warning. In the town records, someone logs the dead. No names, just marks. Lines carved into wood. So many that the wood begins to crack. Then come the fringe beliefs. You overhear a man swearing that onions absorb the plague. He places one in every corner of his house. You hear another say that sleeping with raw turnips in your socks will draw out the death. A baker sells plague cakes with saffron and crushed emerald. They taste like chalk. People buy them anyway. Someone starts blaming the well. Then the cat. Then the woman with different colored eyes. Panic is a kind of infection, too. But there are bright moments. You meet a midwife who wipes each child's face with warm sage water every morning to keep them grounded. You see a friar teaching people how to make rose vinegar for cleaning. You watch a girl light incense not to hide smell, but to calm her grandmother's breathing. Because even in horror, humans look for comfort. One day a cart rolls through town carrying lime. It's poured into graves to mask the stench of decay. A young man sprinkles it around his home, hoping it will ward off sickness. The wind kicks up white dust. He covers his mouth and stares at the horizon. Then it slows. Weeks pass, fewer bells, fewer carts, fewer funerals. The plague retreats, temporarily. You sit under an apple tree with a cloth soaked in lavender pressed to your face. You survived. You're still not clean. Not by modern standards. But you've washed in rosemary and fear, vinegar and grief. You've scrubbed your soul with ritual and superstition. And for now, that's enough. Sleep tight. You make your way toward the tallest structure in the village, the castle. It looms above the town like a stone god with questionable plumbing. Flags flap from its towers, horses stomp in the outer yard, and the distant sound of metal on metal echoes through the cold air. Inside those thick walls, nobles, Lords? Ladies? Servants? Courtiers? Surely they must be clean. Spoiler. They are not. Welcome to the truth about royal hygiene. A tale of velvet, vermin, and very misleading portraits. You pass through the gates and immediately feel the change. The mud has been replaced by cobblestones. The air smells less like pigs and more like perfume, horse sweat, and expensive food that's just slightly past its prime. The illusion of cleanliness is strong. The reality, more complicated. Inside the main hall, a nobleman glides past you in robes lined with fur and stitched with gold. His hands sparkle with rings. His breath smells like garlic wine. He looks clean. But he hasn't bathed in 2 weeks. You know this because he just said so, proudly. Because here's the twist. Many nobles believe that bathing too often weakened the body. It opened the pores, let in bad air, invited disease. Sound familiar? The richer you were, the less likely you were to dunk yourself in hot water. Why? Because you didn't need to. You had servants to wash your linens, spritz your hands with rose water, and rub your face with honey-soaked cloths. Clean skin was less important than clean clothes. That was the real signal of wealth. And wealth in this castle hangs from every wall, walks on every staircase, and lounges dramatically in every overstuffed chair. You're escorted to the solar, a warm upper-floor chamber where ladies embroider by the fire. One of them waves you over, smiling with the faintest scent of jasmine clinging to her sleeves. She's just finished her morning routine, brushed her hair 100 strokes with a silver comb, dabbed her cheeks with vinegar and egg whites for clarity, and cleaned her teeth with a soft linen cloth dipped in sage ash. No soap, no water, just rituals. You peek at the vanity table. Tiny bottles hold oils, herbs, ground pearls. There's a carved ivory stick meant to remove earwax. There's a pot of saffron paste for her cheeks. There's even a small pick made from whalebone, used for scraping the tongue. Royal hygiene, you realize, is all about surface control. Servants keep things looking clean. They sweep rushes from the floor, change the straw, scatter herbs like confetti. But those rushes, they're hiding crumbs, hair, scraps of meat, bugs, and somewhere, an entire dead mouse. You walk past the guardrobe. Yes, even nobles use glorified poop chutes. This one's lined with stone, has a cushion, fancy, and a small window to let in the breeze, essential. A pot of lavender sits on the sill. It's not helping. Further down the hall, a royal physician checks the pulse of a young duke. He nods, prescribes fewer sweets and more sage-infused wine, and leaves. You overhear him tell a servant to burn the boy's shoes. You don't ask. Now let's talk beds. They are massive. Piled with feather mattresses, velvet coverlets, embroidered pillows. They are also filthy. Lice, fleas, and mites loved noble beds. Why wouldn't they? Warm, plush, rarely aired out, and full of skin flakes from people who hadn't bathed in months. You pass a servant holding a beater stick and a fur blanket. She's heading to the courtyard to flog the bedding. Not metaphorically. Literally beat the bugs out. Nearby, a footman gently scrubs his master's boots with wine. Wine. It disinfects. Kind of. It also makes the boots smell marginally better than the feet inside them. Then there's the food. Lavish, endless, and messy. Tables are wiped down with cloths. Hands are rinsed between courses. Some nobles even wear gloves to eat. But hygiene isn't about bacteria here. It's about presentation. You see a knight dunking a chicken leg into honey sauce, drop it onto his sleeve, and laugh. "Servants'll fix it," he says. Servants clean the clothes, the floors, the fingernails of the lord who refuses to touch soap. You wonder how many of them ever get a turn at the bath. Spoiler, very few. You pass the queen's chamber. It smells of roses and beeswax. A young girl brushes the queen's hair with long, slow strokes. There's talk of applying mouse fur to her eyebrows to even them out. You try not to stare. There's a bath prepared, though it's more symbolic than practical. A wooden tub lined with linen, sprinkled with rose petals, filled with warm water and milk. The queen may dip in, she may not. She might just sit beside it and inhale the steam. Because sometimes in royal hygiene, just pretending to bathe was enough. You hear whispers about a visiting prince who hasn't changed his shirt in a month. It's embroidered with rubies. It also smells like spoiled butter. But no one dares mention it. Historians still argue whether nobles truly believed they were cleaner, or if they just outsourced the dirt. They wore perfume to mask odor, painted their faces with lead-based makeup, changed clothes instead of washing bodies. A nobleman once wrote, "I wear fresh linen daily and thus need not bathe more than twice a year." His wife wore silk soaked in violet water and carried a pomander of clove-stuffed lemon. Her bath? Once a season. Fringe beliefs? Oh yes. Some thought wearing silk kept the body sealed and protected from stink. Others wore holy medallions that allegedly repelled sweat. A few noblewomen lined their shoes with rosemary, rose petals, and even crushed emeralds to purify each step. Emeralds. In their shoes. You retreat to the garden, overwhelmed. A servant nearby pours water over a noble's hands. He rubs them delicately, then dries them on a towel. It's a choreographed ritual. You watch the towel get passed to a younger servant, who sniffs it, and grimaces. At sunset, you sit near the stables. The smell of horses, hay, and leather is strong, but honest. A stable boy walks past, shirt soaked with sweat, face streaked with dust. He nods at you. "You smell like violets," he says, then grins. "Must have been in the castle." You grin back, because he's not wrong. You're perfumed, you're powdered, you're dipped in illusion. But real cleanliness? You'll find more of that outside the velvet walls. Sleep tight. You wake up before sunrise, your blanket pulled tight around your shoulders. The taste of damp straw and medieval air lingering in your throat. The fire's gone out. A rooster screams somewhere in the distance like he knows something you don't. You sit up slowly. Everything aches, from your feet to your pride, to the space behind your eyes where you've been mentally filing every terrible smell for 2 weeks straight. Congratulations, you've survived medieval hygiene. You get up and start walking, through the still sleeping village, past carts piled high with turnips, goats chewing on fence posts, and one particularly aggressive rooster who tries to bite your ankle. And as you walk, it all comes back to you. The garderobes hanging precariously off castle towers. The chamber pots dumped with the casual grace of a shrug and a "Gardy-loo." The rush-strewn floors hiding all manner of mysteries, including that rat you never saw leave. You remember the baths, the communal tubs, the floating herbs, the questionable water reuse policy, and that one guy who dunked bread rolls in bathwater like it was a stew. You remember your first dry scrub, when a woman tried to make you smell better with vinegar and sage, and instead made you smell like a haunted salad. You think about hair, scratched, combed, powdered, perfumed, and forever full of things that wriggle. About beards soaked in goose fat, scented sachets tucked into sleeves, and people swearing on their lives that a ribbon of rosemary could keep death away. You pass a woman tending to her linens, humming as she rubs her shift with a cloth dipped in wine and ashes. It's weirdly beautiful, functional, almost sacred. You remember the midwives, the quiet strength of women cleaning each other's bodies and wounds, tending to life with hands that knew blood and herbs and whispered prayers. You remember the herbal bundles hidden in belts, the hushed warnings, the laughter through pain. You remember the plague smoke, barrels of burning herbs, masks stuffed with clove and despair, and people who truly believed they could clean the air with fire and faith alone. The fear in their eyes, the hope in their vinegar-washed hands. You think of the monks quietly scrubbing their feet in stone basins, combing their hair with reverence, treating soap like a prayer. And you remember the nobleman who hadn't bathed since St. Martin's Day but wore a ruby-studded shirt and smelled like fermented citrus and secrets. You think about the lice, the fleas, the bugs, the rats in the rafters. The time you tried to sleep with garlic tucked in your sock to draw out the bad air. You smelled like medieval lasagna for a week, and yet somehow it all blends into something familiar. Because for all their bizarre beliefs and creative misunderstandings of biology, medieval people were trying. Every leaf tucked behind an ear, every lavender-dabbed scarf, every linen shift boiled and beaten and dried in the sun. These weren't quirks, they were acts of resistance. They lived in filth, yes, but they fought it. With herbs, with vinegar, with whatever they could scrape together in a world where dirt was a constant and comfort was rare. You keep walking. The sun creeps over the horizon, soft and pink, gilding the rooftops in a light that somehow makes even the mud look poetic. A child waves to you. She has wild hair and a shirt with 3 different stains. She's dragging a stick through a puddle. She's perfect. And in that moment, you realize something important. Medieval hygiene wasn't about being clean. Not really. It was about trying to be clean enough. Clean enough to sit with neighbors, clean enough to walk into church, clean enough to look at yourself in a warped bit of polished metal and think, okay, I'm still here. It was messy. It was flawed. It was sometimes completely unhinged, but it was human. And now, with your nose broken in, your hands scarred from vinegar scrubs, and your soul about 4 pounds heavier from the psychic weight of the word guardrobe, you lie back on a hay pile. The wind rustles the thatch above you. Someone's sweeping the square. Somewhere in the distance, a baby cries and a cow sneezes. You breathe in. You exhale, and you let it go. The fire is low now. Just soft crackles like gentle whispers in the silence. Your breath slows. Your thoughts stretch out like laundry drying in the breeze. Let the images of the day fall away. The chamber pots, the bathhouse steam, the whispered advice about turnips in your boots. Let them soften, blur like ink fading from an old manuscript. Picture clean linen fluttering on a line. Not perfect, not spotless, but clean enough. Let that linen sway in your mind. Back and forth, back and forth. Think of the sound of combs brushing through hair, the gentle tug and release, the warmth of water poured from a clay jug, the scent of rosemary and smoke in the air, the hush of a monastery garden, the giggle of children chasing, lice with combs carved from horn. Let it all go now. You've wandered through the strange, surprisingly tender rituals of a world where cleanliness was a battle fought daily. Not with disinfectants or dermatologists, but with herbs, ash, and sheer stubbornness. Now you're safe. You're warm. You're out of the muck and the noise and the never-ending itch behind your ears. All that's left is this moment, this breath, this calm. You did it. You survived medieval hygiene, sweet dreams.